Welcome, everyone, on this sunshiny evening. This will be a continuation of the November 9 meeting. If you remember, we're still in having conversations about the solar regulations. Staff, would you provided with us a document for us to review prior to this meeting. Do you have any comments concerning that?
Sure. If you recall, last month we discussed a kind of change in the direction from the county commissioners, that they don't want us to spend any more time on developing commercial solar regulations, and instead they want this board to focus on doing what they call limited scale solar regulations and possibly residential solar regulations. And so at our last meeting, this board was briefed on that new direction, and then at the end of that meeting, this board directed staff to provide them with a proposal, if you will. And so what I have done is, what you directed is to provide you a proposal on now addressing limited scale solar regulations and also some residential regulations. A lot of it was carryover. A lot of it is what I have questions on. I tried to give this board something to go off of here, and so I took our commercial regulations and I eliminated some things. I added some, and what you have in the blue is what I had changed. And I apologize for the document. It looked a lot lighter on the computer than it does printed out here. But what's in blue is what I have changed. What's highlighted in yellow are what I think are discussion topics that this board needs to give staff direction on, and we can get further into that as we go through the document again. But that's what the two colors mean on that. And I think once, maybe after this meeting, depending on how far we get, then I can post this on the website as an update. Right now, I think it's in a state of where I'm not sure where this board wants to go with limited scale regulations versus where maybe staff is at. And so I think hopefully, after tonight's discussion, we'll have maybe a cleaner document, something that would be able to review. This board can give staff some direction on where maybe they would like to take limited scale solar regulations. So that's my little statement here. Is there any comments from the board or questions right now? I think maybe the first thing is we could start out with the residential and go from there. The residential is the two-page document, but
These are samples of residential.
yeah. So if no questions, I don't want to jump in, but no questions. So on the table is I just provided this board a sample of what a residential ground-mounted solar project could look like. I visited with some people in the industry on that, and they confirmed really what you're seeing in the pictures. A residential ground mount is different than what I thought it was. I think there might have been some thought that it might be a couple, 3 or 4 poles that stick in the ground on somebody's property to provide them with solar power. And I think, as you see in the pictures that I provided you, it's something quite different. And so I think this board still has the option to choose to regulate that ground mount or not. And so with that change in direction, I think the staff has discussed here, Don and I think residential ground-mounted solar regulations would fit better under Article 15, which is our accessory uses in the zoning regulations. You recall the residential was kind of a late addition, I think, to the commercial solar regulations, and so we just kind of added that at the end of the previous document. It didn't really fit with the commercial and limited scale, but we just added that in there. So with this new direction, I think residential solar would fit better under Article 15 because a solar project in a residential district is a type of residential accessory use. And so I've copied a portion of Article 15 and where we would fit that. And on page 1513, I have what's highlighted there is in the agricultural district, the following accessory uses are allowed, and it goes through a series of accessory uses in the agricultural district. You turn over to page 1514, what's highlighted in yellow under letter L is what I have added for residential solar in an agricultural zoning district. And right now, based off of our previous discussions here, setbacks are going to be required as found in Article 13, which is where we find our setbacks for all kinds of buildings or accessory uses. I did add, though, rather than just saying setbacks or this, I did add that the setbacks shall be measured from the nearest horizontal point of a solar panel to the property line. That will help define how close you can get a solar panel to a property line. Because right now, like I said, 30 foot from a road right away, 10 foot from a side yard property line is a general setback that we have. Well, where is that 10-foot measure? Is it measured from the property line to the mount, or is it measured from the property line to the actual panel? And this helps, I hope, define where we're talking about how close you can get a ground mount to somebody's property line. Obviously, that is subject to your review and your changes if you would have any. That's just where I think we left off last couple of months discussing this. Maximum height of 20 feet. Agricultural uses of ground-mounted solar panels will be exempt from the zoning regulations so long as the person would apply for a no-fee zoning permit and a no-fee agricultural exemption permit. That lets me know that the use of those solar panels is going to be for an agricultural use, and therefore if they submit that and put in writing what they're using those panels for, it would be exempt from the zoning regulations. And then lastly, just for clarification purposes, roof-mounted solar energy systems will be exempt. So we're not going to regulate somebody that wants to put solar panels on a barn, for example.
Okay, I've got a question.
At that
On number
point?
2, where it says the maximum height shall be 20 feet. I mean, up there at L, it says roof and ground mounted. And then number 2, it says, does that 20 feet not include roof mounted?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah. It says, my thinking in saying roof and ground mounted is because people are going to want to know, do I have to get a permit for a roof mounted type of system? So then in number 4, I clarify that by saying, okay, a roof mounted is exempt from the zoning regulations because people are going to want to know, well, I want to do a roof mounted system. Where do I find that? Oh, it's in Article 15. Here it says roof mounted, but now if I read on, it says it's exempt from the zoning regulations, meaning that you don't need a permit.
I got another question for you, Mark. I mean, in the zoning regs, we have accessory buildings, depending on the size, depends on the size of the tract of land they're going to be put on, without having to go through a conditional use permit and stuff like that.
Special exception.
I don't know if any of us were visualizing something like this when we've been talking about these ground-mounted solar systems. Some of these are very large. I don't know if I'm the only one that might have a little bit of a concern about the size of these ground-mounted systems on a smaller tract of land, even though you have the setback from the property line. You're going to have a pretty huge footprint possibly with no regulation.
That's really kind of why I provided the pictures. And mind you, these aren't panels from Reno County. These are just simply typing in, show me pictures of residential ground-mounted system. That's all I did. No scientific, study done or anything like that. Just random picture to give this board an idea, because after visiting with some people in the industry, I did not realize I was misinformed about what I would expect on a residential, and so that's why I wanted to provide that additional information. So, very fair question for the board.
Food for thought, I guess. You know.
So, I'm curious, have any further clarification on what's limited scale?
We do, and we'll discuss what limited scale is after this, yeah.
Okay.
Yep,
Okay, yeah.
yep, we have a definition of that now.
You know, as far as the ground mounted residential, I don't have a problem putting it in Article 15, but like I said, I still have a concern about not having any possible limitations on size, if you want to call it that.
If it's considered an accessory, that square footage would it fall under that square footage?
No, because that's for accessory buildings, and these are not buildings. These would be an accessory structure, but it's not an accessory building. A building being a four-sided walled enclosure, you know, this would be more of a structure.
I need to measure the square footage on a solar system, particularly if
So
they're,
it's one of these things where
you know,
everything is a structure. You know, a fence, a swing set, a carport, but not everything is a building. So a fence is not a building, you know, a carport is not a building unless it's enclosed along four walls. So that's kind of the difference.
Okay.
And so, so with that information, yeah, I think, you know, this board can come up with different setbacks, you know, if they want, or they can go with this, or they can come up with other types of regulations if you so choose. I don't think a decision necessarily has to be made tonight. If you want to hear my presentation and then think about what you want to do, you're certainly, you know, able to do something like that.
So I got a question, Mark. On page 1515, where it talks about how an accessory building or use can't occupy a front yard. So the way it's written now, does that, the ground mount solar is counted. It's subject to that regulation, right?
No accessory building or use shall
So it'd be under section
You
A.
read that that first sentence.
Yeah, well, yeah, because it's an accessory use. It's not a building, but it's a use.
So if
And
we have a
but-
small lot, like say an acre or a half acre, it'll be, you know, you'll have the house somewhere, and then you'll have your setbacks, and the front yard will be off limits. So there's gonna be inherent limitations to the
Yes.
maximum size.
Yep.
no, well, I mean, just
I would, go ahead, Commissioner.
from the setback from the property lines, yes. I mean, you'd have to put it on the side, one side of the property or the back.
Right.
But as long as it met the setbacks from the property lines on those sides, you could fill the whole blooming area with solar panels. You know,
Right, that area limited, you know, up to the house or the
Yeah.
front yard or.
yeah. I mean, is that what you want?
So the
Next door neighbor, you know.
The required front yard term, that's a fancy way of saying the required setback. And so what that is saying is that no building or use shall occupy the 30-foot setback, say, from the road. So you can't put a solar panel 20 feet from the road right away because the required setback is 30 feet. Except if it's a basketball goal or flagpole or a fence is permitted. Basketball goals, flagpoles, fences, you can put those on your property line, okay? And so, but not a building. A building can't go 20 foot, you know, from a front yard setback. These examples given here are minor uses, if you will, a flagpole, for example. You know, I mean, you can put a flagpole at the end of your driveway that may be right near the road, for example, you know, if you wanted to do that. And so we're not regulating something like that, but the required front yard is actually a different way of saying the required setback requirement in that zoning district.
Refresh my memory because I can't remember everything anymore. What on buildings, accessory buildings, what are the size limitations based on lot sizes?
We just changed it.
Yeah.
A couple years ago, a couple years. So if it's 2-acre parcel or less, you are allowed to have 2,000 square foot of accessory building.
500 or 2,000.
If it's 2.01 acres or greater, you're allowed to have 5,000 square feet.
Okay.
Correct? Mr.
I think
Chairman?
that's right.
That's what I'm remembering.
Yeah, I knew the 5,000, I could remember.
Anticipating that question, I just stopped and think, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This is a quick part.
Two acres, 2 acres is the,
2 acres and
is
2,000.
the balance.
2 acres is the tipping point between 2,000 and 5, without going through the Board of Zoning Appeals, of course. It's not prohibiting that, it's saying that the Board of Zoning Appeals has to review that if you want to exceed that square footage.
Is that buildings and structures?
No, it's
Just
buildings.
That's just building.
Buildings. And you gotta remember, solar panels are not buildings.
So there's no square foot limit on
No square foot
structures?
limit, unless this board wants to add one.
And Mark, would you refresh my memory, and I've been thumbing through all these pages here, seeing blue and seeing yellow. Tell me again, what does yellow mean that you get, and what does blue mean?
Yellow is something that staff believes the board needs to review and leave alone or change or eliminate. Blue would be something that staff has changed. So for example, like in the document, you'll see that I've highlighted limited scale commercial. That used to say commercial scale solar, now it says limited scale, so that is a change that staff made from the public hearing document on commercial regulations.
I've written it down, so hopefully I don't have to ask that again.
That's okay, I have to think about it myself too.
Can you clarify my mind on number 3 and the yellow? Agricultural uses are exempt from zoning regulations?
Agricultural buildings and agricultural uses are exempt from the zoning regulations and so long as they are documented by the owner to me through a no-fee zoning permit and no-fee agriculture exemption. So for example, you have to submit this permit, you have to articulate to me that this building is going to be used to store my, agricultural equipment in. It's going to be used to house cattle used in my farming operation. If that is what the only use of that building is, then that can be exempt from the zoning regulations.
And that means that building can be put on the property
To
line?
be put on the property line, the only thing we have is a front yard setback requirement. So yes, theoretically, somebody could put a large agricultural building on the property line if it is only used for agricultural purposes. That doesn't mean that you can park your boat in there, except park your RV, because a boat or RV is not part of the agricultural operation.
So are solar,
If a solar panel, for example, if that solar panel is used to
my milk barn?
power your milk barn, perfect example, something like that.
Sort of water wells. that type of
Water
thing,
wells.
or Cattle.
Exclusively or in part?
Exclusively. If any part of those panels are used to power your residential house, then it is not agricultural exempt, and it has to meet whatever requirements are in the regulations. It could be used to power your milk barn, but also used to power your house, it's not agriculturally exempt.
So is that, all right, I'm kind of like Steve, got to remind myself here a little bit. You're talking about zoned ag, and they come and apply for that exemption that you just, what about a rural residential small acreage?
It's not
It's not the same.
not the same, we're talking about the use. It doesn't make any difference what the zoning is.
Okay, that clarified.
Article 15 just separates out agricultural and residential.
So-
Because you got to remember, we could have a 35-acre parcel of ground. It's more than likely going to be zoned residential, but it could be a small hobby farm operation. If that person is going to put up a barn for his milking operation, then it'd be ag exempt, even though it's zoned residential. So it gets a little confusing. You have to get it in your mind. We're talking about the use.
I just had to
We're not
get it
talking about
clarified on
zoning.
that piece of that puzzle.
Solar panels on your chicken coop.
There you go.
Yeah, it's the use of the building, not the zoning of the property in this case, so.
Gotcha. Okay.
So, since we are moving this to Article 15 for the residential regulation portion of solar, it will take a new public hearing on something like that, because you gotta remember, we had a public hearing on Article 25 or whatever, Article 25. And so we're gonna move that, so we did not notice this article to the paper and to the townships and cities, and so that takes another public hearing. However, I feel like it's appropriate to go ahead and discuss this while we're on our minds, and it's just a matter of making sure that it's legally noticed to have that hearing. Since we do have to have another hearing, I'm gonna take that opportunity, I think, to do a couple other little tweaks to Article 15, and we can discuss those, at a future meeting before we do it. One of them is actually highlighted right under page 1514 under letter A. I'm gonna eliminate the word solar collectors, because, what does that mean? I don't know. There's not a definition in the zoning regulations of what a solar collector is. I mean, you may have an idea of what it is. For like me, a solar collector to me could be a solar cover for your swimming pool. I mean, that's what I would think. That's one example. So what does that mean? Without a definition, it needs to be probably just taken out of the regulations. And so I'm gonna do that, and then I have another little amendment that we'll talk about maybe next time, with that.
So Mark, if we move this to Article 15, which requires a new hearing, then that means that ground-mounted private solar will still be,
We dealt it with Article 15.
right, but until we go through the public hearing process, that'll still be off the table for any kind of development
Yes.
until that time.
Yeah. Hopefully
The
we'll take care of that.
moratorium
Yeah, the moratorium, that's where my frozen brain
That's
was.
fine. Mine was trying to go right along with
Thank
you,
you, I'm
Alan.
glad you got it, yeah. So then, after we finish Article 25, the moratorium for ground mount private solar is still be in effect? Okay.
Yes.
So no one can do a ground mount right now.
Period.
No one can do a ground mount, period. Right now.
So if we go this route, we probably want to do it sooner rather than later.
Yes.
Okay.
I think the only issue I have with this is, size limitations, consideration. I don't know.
On page 1514, under number 2, you see it looks like it's kind of highlighted green. That is where it talks about residential accessory uses. So letter H on page 1516 just continues the same thing that we discussed under the agricultural zoning district, the same exact wording and everything. And so I would assume that if you would change, something in the ag district, you may change something in the residential zoning districts. I would caution you a little bit if you're looking at potentially, setbacks or other types of restrictions that when you get to the residential zoning district, you're talking about a lot smaller parcels. The agricultural district usually can be 40 acres or greater. So if you want to put a different setback in or whatever, then that may be okay for the ag district. But if you carry that over to the residential district, that may have some unintended consequences where you may accidentally prevent somebody from putting solar in on a residential property if you make the setback greater, whatever that number may be. I guess that's all the comments that I have as far as that goes on the residential end of things.
What's the board's opinion. It looks like we've got some homework to do on those 2 pages. At least from what I can see, I would not feel comfortable making any decisions on making a final document. I think the changes as staff has made it has given us a roadmap. It's been a good roadmap, and I think the 2 comments, I think, Steve, you brought both of them up, the setbacks and the square feet limitation potentially, or what that looks like. I don't know. I have no idea what that looks like.
Well, I don't either. That's what I was
So
talking about.
that's something that we probably need to do a little homework on.
Right now, like I say, setbacks for the ag district, 50 feet from the road right of way and 30 feet off of all the other property lines. In the residential districts, you're looking at 30 feet off the road right of way. The side and rear yard setbacks vary depending on what the zoning district is, but it can be anywhere from 8 to 20 feet off of a property line. And so, something to think about there.
Back is what, 10 feet?
That could be 10 feet on like R2 and R3 unless there's like a utility easement that's in the back of a residential subdivision, and then it could be greater, something like that. But yeah.
Now, what is the smallest lot size that we possibly would be dealing with?
That's an open-ended question. I mean,
Well, yeah.
you could have, with public sewer and public water, I mean, you could have lot sizes like you would find in a city. I mean, you could have quarter acre or less. I mean, we've got subdivisions down around the lake, as you may know, that are, pushing that. And they're not on public sewer and water, by the way, but they're just, were developed back in the 60s and so, but, I mean, yeah. But generally, I mean, taking all things aside with sewer and water availability, I mean, you're looking at residential subdivisions with 3 acre minimum. That's what we have in our R1 zoning district out there. Somebody wanted, we just did the one subdivision here a few months ago. Those lots were, 3.5 to 4 acres. So, I think generally, unless it's a pre-existing parcel or lot, you're probably gonna look at a minimum of 3. That's what we're gonna wanna see.
But we do have a lot of the pre-existing ones.
There is a lot of parcels out there that are less than 3, whether they're in a residential subdivision or something that was divided off prior to zoning requirements.
I think, to me, we need to look at those, be included in whatever we're doing here. Because if we don't, and then somebody comes in and just blankets their thing,
Is there,
ground mounted solar systems and, whatever,
I don't know, is there any information that I can provide this board for the next time or otherwise that would help you? Or, I mean, if there is, certainly let me
All
know.
the setbacks are in the zoning regulations.
Article 13.
Yep. So that would give us at least in my mind, that would give us at least the basis to start off.
Do you know if any other counties do any regulation of residential ground mounted systems?
I'm sure there are, but I don't know, like right offhand, it's been a little bit since I've looked through them. This was based off of our discussions over the past year on what you wanted to do with residential things, so that may change, given, maybe some additional knowledge that you've acquired, and stuff, so.
Thinking of separating the private off into Article 15, is the term is escaping me right now, but selling back my excess power,
Net
metering, is that addressed somewhere?
It's not specifically addressed in there, but, that's something that, we're not gonna, at least right now, be concerned about for residential use.
I don't think the economics of what the utility companies are paying for that really would, promote you putting in excess capacity to sell it back to the utility. Cost benefit, it's not gonna be worth it.
It seems to be the direction that the industry is headed.
The solar, yeah, but you look at the utilities, they're the ones that are be buying it back. And I know out at Ark Valley, they will, but it's, you know, a pittance compared to, you know, what you're paying for your electricity.
That's where we're at now.
Yeah. So I don't think, you know, any excess capacity that you generate, yeah, there's no problem selling that back. I don't have any issue with that.
I guess you gotta think of it in terms of, you know, what's the concern you as a neighboring property owner, if somebody would do that, and
Does,
there is, then-
Would be when the cost benefit X occurs, and suddenly my neighbor wants to fill his entire property with solar power generation equipment.
now, so the definition of private solar energy system in Article 25, does that also apply to the term in Article 15? Because if that's true, then it looks like that we account for it in the definition in Article 25.
yes, it would apply.
Okay. So then in that case, then, would, you know, section 9 on page 25 too. I mean, it sounds like that covers that, where we permit net metering, but really this energy system is designed for personal use.
I mean, if it would help, I could remove that definition there and put it, I could put it under our normal definitions in Article 1, but it should cover it right there, though.
Yeah.
I'm just thinking if I was gonna be looking at doing this and I was new to the process, and I looked at Article 15 only, that definition would not be there,
Right.
whether it should be. It would make more sense to take it out of the limited, out of Article 25. Maybe not, maybe it's in other places.
We'll think about it. Stan, we can discuss it a bit and.
Just a thought.
Yeah. We'll discuss it here, and we can report back next time about what staff's opinion would be of that. If it'd be better there or not. I mean, I can see it right now, maybe both ways a little bit.
Yeah, yeah. Depends on which way the wind's blowing for me right now, but right now it's blowing.
I mean, I think it's something typical in a lot of zoning regulations in the sense that you read one thing, you think, oh, yes, that's good, I can do that, or no, I can't do that. You gotta read the regulations as a whole and understand how each article intermingles with other articles here.
A lot of people don't do that.
And not go to
There's
those,
a
That's where I,
section, so it wouldn't hurt
Yeah.
to put it in both sections,
Yeah.
you know.
Not a lot of planners don't do that either, you know, as well, either.
Yeah, I understand.
My colleagues,
we gotta make this as easy as possible to
Yeah.
follow.
Contractors and things like that.
Yeah, it's hard. You really have to, that's why you have to really study the document, and understand how all the articles.
Yeah, I think it would be worthwhile to move definition over into Article 15.
I don't know if I put it there, but I would probably put it under Article 1 maybe, with the rest of our definitions, rather than having it as an accessory use. We'll discuss. We'll come up with something and bring it back to the board.
Any other questions or clarifications we need before we move on the residential? Thank you for the pictures, by the way. That helped me understand that.
Yeah.
Hurt your simplicity, Mark.
I know, yeah. I'm a glutton for punishment or something, yeah. Stuff, so. All right, you want to move on to the next document?
Yep, let's move on to Article 25.
So again, things highlighted in yellow are items that the board needs to give staff direction on, either eliminate, keep, add to. Items in blue is what staff, for lack of a better term, took the liberty of making a change. Still obviously open for discussion with this board for elimination or what, but that's something that staff did. And so if we just go through page by page, at the top of 25-1, the sections are highlighted in yellow. Those will change based off of your direction to staff, and so I just highlighted that because they may say the same, they may need to change based off of what this board decides.
We've got one correction you might want to note on that page.
Okay.
On item 25-101-2, second line, where it says the zoning regulation is prohibited, should be in the unincorporated portion.
In,
Is that right?
There's something missing there.
yeah,
I'm assuming it's word in.
yep, in the, wow, yep, good catch, okay.
So the way that it's written now, this won't, number 2 then, it pretty much defines that we're not dealing with the unzoned portion. Oh, no, it's, with the unzoned portion of the county, correct?
Right, yeah. We haven't received that direction from the county
Yeah,
commission.
we haven't received that direction, so.
Okay.
So this still may get tweaked, yeah, it probably should have been highlighted somehow, but yeah. I'll add the word just so we have it in case, but yeah, talking about the solar energy system, yeah. Once we get that full direction, then we'll know, but yeah, this article is strictly dealing with the zoned area of the county, nothing out in the western part of the county, okay? Not promising, go ahead.
Yeah, you don't create regulations for the unzoned part of the county.
So that's done through a separate process? for
Yes,
the-
that's, the county commissioners can extend that out there, and then we have to make that possible, but you never create regulations for the unzoned. Just like wind in the unzoned, no, now that's zoned for wind.
So that was all done through the county commission then? It didn't come through here?
Well, it did.
Well,
They created a separate zoning
It
district.
created a separate zoning district,
Okay.
but there is not a separate zoning district for solar in the unzoned part of the county right now, so you're just concentrating on the zoned right now. Does that make sense?
Sure.
Clear as mud, as they-
Clear as mud, that was well done.
Join the club.
I did this fairly quick because I wanted to try and get this document to the board with the holidays coming up and me being gone and everything, because I wanted you to have something to read. So I'm not promising that it's going to be perfect. I may have missed some things in here, so I appreciate, reviewing any other kind of corrections. But yeah, number 2 may have to be tweaked, Alan, depending on what happens down the road here. The rest of page 1 is essentially just changing commercial scale solar to limited scale. Anything else? If we move on to page 2 then, highlighted in blue are the definitions that got tweaked, and Harley, this is to your question earlier here. Principal building was the first one that I had changed. Originally, it just said a primary residential structure. I added really the words commercial or industrial, because as you know, we do have commercial and industrial out in the county, so there may not always be a residential structure, a principal residential structure, so you could have a principal commercial or principal industrial structure on the property. Next one was solar energy system commercial. Here's where the new direction from the county commissioners came, that we wanted to not consider commercial anymore, but consider limited commercial. So how do you define that? It was talked about at that meeting to have 10 acres and 2 megawatts be the dividing line. So Harley, if you can see that, so under a commercial solar energy system, we say that that's a type of energy facility which is greater than 10 acres in size or capable of generating greater than 2 megawatts. And then conversely, a limited scale commercial solar energy system will be a type of energy facility which is 10 acres or less in size and generates 2 megawatts of AC power or less per facility. And I think it's key to make that per facility, okay? So that was the big change. That's how we're gonna define what a limited scale is and what a commercial scale is.
How close are the Ark Valley, whatever,
One we
farms?
did a few years ago was about 8.5 acres, and we've actually had some discussions with them, and they're comfortable with the 10 acres and 2 megawatt. Got to keep in mind, though, it's not always going to be necessarily Ark Valley. It could be Evergy, it could be another company, it could be somebody else doing something different that says that it's a limited scale. So when you read this, don't always think it's strictly Ark Valley. You got to think anybody that can do this, okay?
But I was just thinking of Ark Valley and, if that's what they have now, I guess in my mind, there would predictably be a greater need going forward, so, make it 15 acres and 3 megawatts, or, allow some expansion.
Well, the two, that's per facility, so they can put in multiple facilities. So they have, what, one or two now, and I think they're planning on a
Or they
third
could
one.
put in
aren't they, Mark?
multiple larger facilities,
Pardon?
or they could put in multiple larger facilities.
Good.
As of right now, no. 'Cause we asked that question.
And this acreage and megawatts satisfied them. They was very pleased with this. This covered anything that they do. That's what they told us.
For the foreseeable future.
Yeah.
Meaning
Do
like,
you have any other I don't know how you'd phrase it, public electric utilities? I know like the city of Stafford does theirs. I don't know if you have any other co-ops that are operating within the county.
Sedgwick County operates, I think, in the, Sedgwick County Co-op, I think, is in the southeast corner, on the extreme southeast corner.
I think
I don't know if there's-
Midwest Energy
Midwest
covers the
Energy.
small towns along Highway 50.
Yeah, okay. So, but yeah, like Don said, I mean, this satisfied them for the immediate future, if you will. Because like you say, we don't want to create this potentially, and then a couple years down the road, now they want a 3 megawatt. So it's either, no, you can't do that, or we're doing a text amendment. That's what we want to do. So that's why we talked to them about what their initial concerns were. And we invited them to review the document once we get it set again. But yeah.
Do we need some kind of a minimum distance between facilities?
That's coming up.
Okay.
That's coming up. Good,
He's got it in here.
That's coming up, Mr. Martin, so good catch and everything. So, again, at the bottom of 25.2, I just added limited scale here to that. Page 25.3. Here's where I think the board starts to come into play a little bit more here on letter D. Letter D with the general public hearing procedures. With the county commissioner approval of the CUP, the county commissioners and the applicant will enter into a development agreement outlining the content found in 2510. Do we want a developer's agreement with a limited scale 10-acre, 2 megawatt site? We're talking about one 10-acre parcel of ground, more than likely being owned by the energy co-op, not necessarily leased. Could be leased, but not necessarily. So
That's going to take some discussion and some homework.
and you'll notice in the document, that is why it's highlighted, is it needed? We didn't do it in 2021,
How many factors did
but we
we
didn't
have?
have regulations in 2021 really either. So that's the big question is, and that's really the whole document, do we want this or not? If we did do one, it's probably going to be, obviously, very limited versus a large commercial, several thousand acre type of site. We're talking about one 10-acre site, one entrance maybe to the property, one access road, I mean, it's like,
Could it be optional at the discretion of the county commission? I'm just thinking if it's in a particularly sensitive area, geographic area, or it's either do it or not do it.
yeah.
I think it'd be best.
I think it's, if you ask in my opinion, I think it's do it or not do it. I don't know, I mean, like you said, I know you're just talking, but like, what's a sensitive area? What's sensitive to you may not be sensitive to me and vice versa as well.
Yeah, it would be subjective.
Do we have, is there any other kind of land use besides solar or wind that we would require this kind of development agreement?
Not on the books. Now, if you're talking a major corporation that comes in, yeah, there might be something, not through zoning that we would do, but maybe something separate through the county commissioners. But as far as zoning regulations,
regs, we don't require.
no, there's nothing like that. We didn't do it with the 8-acre Ark Valley site a couple of years ago, and
In fact, you only had 9 conditions, and we accepted that unanimously. Just take that, I rolled back the clock a little bit and asked Mark to give me some minutes, and so I could review that again, and it was, now granted, roll the clock forward, Steve. We've gotten a lot smarter in that.
We know a lot more than we did,
years.
you know.
But also, the land hasn't changed either. It's just interesting how the nine conditions that staff provided in that particular CUP are they would live on, in my opinion, but that's something for discussion another day.
Could we get a copy of those
Yeah.
at some point? Be interesting to see what it was.
a copy of the,
Those
minutes
minutes that
and
you're
all.
talking about, yeah.
I can copy it or I can email it to everybody.
Okay, that'd be great.
What, copy and email or,
Just email it to us.
okay,
Just email it.
I can do that.
Sorry, Mark, I gave you more work to do.
It's all right.
That's all right.
Just be able to go back and find my email.
Gives us a little bit.
That's what I'm here for.
Because I know what we've got here is probably overkill.
It sure gave
And we need to
me,
pare it back some.
it gave me some perspective on what we did and where we're moving to.
Yeah,
It sure
because this is
did.
overkill for that size of a project, but I don't know if we want to just say, no, we're not going to require anything either.
You still got the same concerns.
Well,
You know,
yeah.
decommissioning, I mean, just because it's little doesn't mean you want them to take a front end loader, dig a hole
and drop them in.
and push it all in.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So that's the big highlight. I mean, I'd like an answer, I guess. I don't want to be, a bully, but yeah, we need to know now. You got some options. You can think about this. We could, like I said, we could have maybe a special meeting in a couple weeks. I can bring back any other changes you want, and this board can think about it a little bit more, study it, and then come back with a direction for me.
I think we need to review it a little more now that
With-
we've got this information.
With your perspective, going through it here, just the kind of line by line of where your mind was and where it kind of gives us a direction of where we need to look at. The special meeting might be on order moving forward, just so we can take time out of the normal schedule for us to focus on this.
Say it's up to you. I mean, it can be left in, it can be modified, it can be eliminated, you know. Certain parts of it can be,
Scale development agreement.
say again, what?
A limited scale development agreement.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, certain aspects of it could be eliminated versus, like Jack has said, decommissioning could be left in. I mean, a road agreement, you're talking about, like I say, one parcel, of ground. There's a lot of stuff that was in there, oversized, overweight permits, zoning permits, that was just added in there just to make sure everything was crystal clear. They would have to get that anyway, if it's even necessary.
We wrote those for considering it's gonna be maybe
Yeah.
a 1,000-acre parcel, so.
Yeah, so,
That's a little different than a 10-acre parcel.
page 25-4, other things, maximum height of utility poles, is that something that we need to know or want to know?
Do we even regulate that? I mean, Art Valley doesn't come to you, say, hey, we got this new pole that's 5 foot longer. They don't come to
This
you and
is
say
from
that.
commercial, so these are things, I mean, if you want a description on whether the project will be connected to an existing distribution line, a new line, or a new substation, I mean,
So if it's in yellow, we're really questioning it, see?
Gotcha. Gotcha.
So what, because he's highlighted the whole index in yellow, so he's questioning everything in this document.
but I didn't want to eliminate it because, you got to remember, this is your document here. You need to tell me what you want to present to the county commissioners. If this was brand new, if we had closed the public hearing, then you would see a totally different document than what you're seeing right now, but we're still in the public hearing from November 9th, and so you need to tell staff what you want to leave in and how you want it modified. So that's kind of the big difference. At the bottom again, on 25-107, on page 25-4, payment for the information cost may be negotiated in the development agreement. This is talking about if we need other plans and stuff like that. You remember if you had a commercial development, think back to the wind case. If we needed extra stuff, then we want that developer to pay for those extra studies. Page 25-5, everything's highlighted there. The applicant needs to submit a report conducted by a qualified third-party company on existing environmental concerns, dealing with wildlife, avian, flora, fauna, geoconservation, things, floodplain or special flood hazard areas. Is that something that's going to be necessary for a limited scale? The next one under number 4, a limited scale again, like I said, you gotta really switch your focus to limited scale, 10 acres right now or less. If it's placed within 1 mile of a public airport, do you want that airport operator, owner to sign off on the project now?
What's your feeling on that? You're pilot, Don. Something that small, within a mile of an airport, would that be a visual problem?
I mean, they have them at airports.
Yeah.
And number 5, all solar panels must be designed and constructed to minimize glare. Well, I mean, the purpose of the panel is to absorb energy, not reflect it. Is that needed? It was in the commercial, and it can still remain in there.
I think you cross everything off on that page.
I can do it now, or I can just review the document and discuss it with you, and then you can come back and tell me then formally what you want to do. It's the board's decision.
I'm remembering this little subdivision out south down the Bueller Haven Road. I don't remember the name on it, but had some lowlands involved.
The one we just approved?
Yeah.
Yeah?
Well, we did require some environmental opinions on that.
As part of the subdivision review process, yes, they had to do a drainage study on that.
So what would be the difference between that and this? I mean, there were questions about where they could build or not build and the elevation changes. And
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah. That parcel of land was I wouldn't buy a lot on it, let's put it that way.
Yeah. I mean, with this, you're talking,
Flood prone to me.
with this, you're talking about a 10-acre parcel maximum, and it'll be, for all intents and purposes, almost covered entirely in panels. I don't know, I can't remember, did you hear the Ark Valley case a couple of years ago? Or you weren't here for that one, yeah. If you look at the site plan, I mean, there was some room between the lease area and the panels, but, you know, a drainage plan would help, you know, verify, you know, that there's not gonna be any kind of runoff from that development onto other people's property. But this is more talking about environmental concerns and stuff, so.
And on that, I had a question between number 3 and number 8 in that same section. Number 8 says an environmental impact assessment.
Yeah.
To me, is a lot like number 3, but I didn't know what the difference would be.
It could be similar, yeah. It might have been something we just didn't realize at the time. I mean, like, an environmental impact statement is probably gonna be a little bit different than addressing environmental concerns. And, you know, an environmental impact statement's a formal document, but that's still gonna go to the whole thing. Do we keep that? Do we modify that? Or leave it alone? Going on, I don't hear anything else. I don't wanna rush, but 25-6, at the bottom, letter B, how the limited scale commercial energy system project will attempt to use the existing terrain, vegetation. Well, like I said previously, you know, if you're limiting it to 10 acres, it's pretty much gonna be the entire parcel outside of maybe, you know, 100-foot or 50-foot perimeter around that. You'll kind of understand that for those of you that weren't here for the Ark Valley one a couple of years ago, when you see their site plan, it's pretty much the entire parcel's covered. I mean, I don't want to say from fence line to fence line, property line to property line, but I mean, they're going to use the 8 acres to 10 acres out there for the project. Jack, this gets to your question earlier. I added letter C underneath that. No limited scale project shall be located within 5 miles of an existing solar energy facility or another proposed limited scale project. And then they got to provide me a map of all the projects in the area. So 5 miles, what that does is that prevents somebody wanting to do a commercial solar project and just doing it 10 acres at a time and just lining them up, 10 acres, 10 acres, 10 acres, and keep on going. The first thing you know, you got 500 acres.
Your 5 mile radius you've got in there, that would be to any other limited solar system,
Any other,
from any other company or whatever. It would
any
be
company,
just
yeah,
that company.
yeah.
So you're talking, that applies to commercial only, not to any private then?
That's just limited scale.
Limited scale.
That's just limited scale.
Not commercial,
Okay.
limited scale.
So if I had a dairy farm and put a 10-acre field in, and somebody wanted to develop a limited scale, they could go in right beside me.
No, well,
Yeah.
yeah, probably
Yeah,
good,
yeah.
yeah.
Yes.
I just don't,
Yes.
I guess I'm thinking of the inverse. I don't want to handcuff if all of a sudden a developer puts in his limited scale across the road from me, and I have a dairy or a chicken farm or a X. I want to be able to put my personal one in.
As long as you meet the definition of private,
Right.
then you're under the residential ag that we previously
They
discussed.
could go border to border with the setbacks.
Yeah.
This just prevents a limited scale growing into
Fair enough.
commercial scale.
That's the question I had written in. We're good.
Page 25.7, I would just highlight, under the lighting, I added that temporary lights needed for investigation concerns or repairing the facility are exempt from the lighting requirement. Under lighting, I said that no lights shall be installed on the limited scale facility. But obviously, if there's some type of issue that needs to be repaired, and it has to be at night, then they're allowed to do that. I think that's just mainly just for clarification purposes in case somebody said, well, hey, there are lights out there all night. So, well, if they're repairing it, then they're allowed. (25)8, under the distribution lines, I modified it a little bit, added. So what I did was I just removed the various types of underground boring. If you recall the old document, I had directional boring, drilling, and as I just thought to myself later, is it really necessary that we call out the 4 or 5 various types of boring that you could possibly do? All we want to know is that the distribution lines associated with it are going to be installed underground. I don't know. That's just my thinking, so I just kind of tried to reduce the wording on that a little bit here. Distribution lines outside of the area covered by the conditional use permit may be installed above ground or below, but only in the right of way or an easement or other legal document. So we added that, or that's something to discuss, excuse me. Outside of the conditional use permit area, the thinking, was, again, do we care?
It's transmission line.
It's transmission line. Under battery storage, my understanding is batteries probably aren't as much in play with limited scale, but they certainly can be, I suppose. I don't want to say definitely not. But what I did here was I just clarified that 2 fences aren't needed if you're going to have batteries on the property, and if the battery storage is going to be inside a fireproof container. I think when I read this before, I started thinking it made it sound like you had your perimeter fence, and then for batteries, we wanted to have another fence inside of a fence. And I think if the facility is within a container, fireproof, you don't need to have another fence. I think the idea was we wanted to make sure that the batteries were being protected from unauthorized entry or whatever. So I modified that, and tried to clarify that. (25)9, I added that warning signs shall just be the minimum federal or state requirement. I mean, we don't need to have I saw certain regulations that had a minimum spacing requirement, like every 20 feet, 40 feet. Just say, you gotta just meet the minimum federal or state standard, and that's good. Highlighted though, and on top of page 25.9 was, battery storage shall not be located within 500 feet of a non-participating property owner. Well, when you're talking about a 10-acre site, pretty much now everybody is going to be a non-participating property owner, because you're only dealing with one 10-acre site that more than likely is going to be owned by that company. And so I think the participating, non-participating issue is probably moot now.
Not if this is a 10-acre tract in the corner of a property and my house is next
Well, but you're a non-participating,
tract over.
You'd be a non-participating property owner automatically, because you don't own the property.
Right.
So,
But I would still want the protection of the,
I'm not saying the setback, I'm just saying, talking about participating or non-participating, I mean.
If you lived across the road, it'd still have to be that 500 foot.
Yeah.
safety zone.
But I think what Mark's trying to say is that there is, the participating land, or property owner, there's only one.
Right.
And that's the landowner, which would be the utility.
Yep.
Yeah.
So what
Thank you.
if, but what if the utility wants to put a shop on the
The 10 acre
property?
site,
Yeah, because then the 500 acres might
Right.
cause a problem if they want to put a shop
500
in.
feet.
500 feet.
Yeah, 500 feet, yeah. So maybe,
Well, but a shop isn't necessarily a principal building.
but I thought we changed principal building to include commercial, industrial, et cetera, et cetera. So if you have a 10-acre property and it's mostly solar panels, but they wanted to have a maintenance shop in the corner, then would they run into problems if they want to put battery storage in later and they don't have 500 feet?
There'd be potential they'd have to buy some more ground.
Right. So I guess I was thinking that maybe leaving non-participating property owner in there might be the way to go.
And that way they could put their building, they would have the risk of.
Yeah, it's on them. They're the experts, and if they want to put it 450 feet away, I think that's on them and their insurance company.
I agree.
Okay. Dealing with noise, that was another one. I mean, noise still could be a little bit of a concern, but it isn't as much to have something in the regs on noise. Then at the bottom of that page, documentation submitting, showing compliance with minimum FCC standards. Again, thinking limited scale, not commercial. Is that something that you still want to have a limited scale company provide you? At the bottom of the page, I added letter D, talking about Kansas identified noxious weeds. Must be sprayed and controlled at all times within the facility. But then also said that the grass can't be higher than 3 foot in height. I didn't want to say something like you gotta mow once a year or twice a year, because we're not here to try and, monitor something like that.
Most of it they'd be putting in like native grasses.
Yes.
I mean, you can find those that maybe get 2 to 3 feet. It depends on the weather. Sometimes they'll get a little taller.
I don't anticipate this being an issue, but again, you can't just think that, we're gonna have a responsible landowner. I mean, it's like, yeah, we know that they'll do that. Yeah, they will. And if they do, then this isn't really an issue for them. It's the one that doesn't do that.
Gives you an enforceable sense.
Yeah.
Right.
So I added that.
Well, the noxious weed's enforceable without it being in these regulations.
It is. It's just, again, maybe it's a little bit overkill, but it just helps to say, hey, yeah, you gotta spray that, or our noxious weed department will be contacting you.
So who enforces that, you or the noxious weed department?
It'd be the noxious weed people.
Gotcha.
No, it's pretty noxious.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Wow.
We better keep the ball rolling here, Mark.
Yeah.
Get a bunch happy.
Middle of 2511, again, here it is, starting to talk about developers agreement. 25-110 is the agreements and requirements. This is after a project has been approved by the county commissioners. Now you start getting into doing a developers agreement where you gotta have a road maintenance plan. I mean, go down the whole list. Traffic management plan is another one on page 2512 that I highlighted. Is that necessary now? A dust control plan, is that necessary for township roads and construction areas? I mean, we're dealing with a 10-acre site. We don't make people implement dust control measures for commercial developments now. Not that we couldn't through the conditional use permit, but it has not been past practice. at the bottom of 2512, the recognition of the landowner's right to be satisfied, it goes back to the developer's agreement, or their private lease agreement. Is that something that's necessary now? I mean, I had my thinking, but like I say, this is in the hands of you as a board. This is your document. Page 2513, you can just kind of go up and down that list. The indemnification agreement, the mitigation agreement, the pilot, fire safety rescue plan, damage reimbursement, so on. Is this something that's really necessary right now?
Let me ask you, on their other solar facilities, how are those taxed, or are they exempt?
I don't know. I don't know that.
Okay. Co-op, I assume the co-op pays property tax, I think it's considered a, not-for-profit
Right.
or
So,
governmental
I don't-
entity, so.
Yeah, a lot of this stuff, the fire safety rescue, I mean, part of the conditional use permit process, send the application to emergency management, send it to the fire district, so they're gonna be aware of the project, Emergency management's in communication, obviously, with the fire district, so they're gonna be, knowledgeable about the project, and I'm sure they'll be getting with the people, so do we need to have a separate, agreement with that? That's the type of thing that I was looking at, I mean, people are gonna be made aware of the project through the conditional use permit process. Again, on 2514, the requirements of getting a zoning permit, is the stormwater pollution plan, is that gonna be necessary? MPDES, is that necessary? All this stuff is probably, I think, a little overkill. I think it was put in place in the commercial end because typically you're gonna have maybe, an out-of-state applicant, and maybe they don't realize that they need a zoning permit, they need a wastewater permit potentially, or they do need a floodplain development permit, you'd like to think they would, but I think this is just something to kind of put in place so people that are outside developers know that, they have to get all that. Now with a 10-acre site, I'm not so sure if we need to have all that, in there. Because they'll be made aware of that anyway through the conditional use permit process and through communications with me. Same thing on the bottom with the construction requirements, and then, on page 2515, that continues on. Transfer of ownership, I don't know if that's as big, of something that's gonna happen now or not. The utility company is going to, own that property more than likely.
They could merge with another.
They could merge.
Yeah, I think you need
But then
something in there
again-
on transfer of ownership.
But if we don't have a developer's agreement, then do we really care who owns the property right now if we're not gonna require a decommissioning and everything that goes with a developer's agreement? So there's where all those regulations tie together. So you can see I didn't make too many changes to the document like maybe you had hoped, because I'm kind of waiting for the board's direction.
You
And
just used a lot of yellow ink.
I just used it.
So we're gonna make you make the.
Yeah, I know.
Because it's not up to us.
So,
Okay,
But you have kind of what we're thinking.
there you go. That gives us a roadmap.
yeah, I kind of gave you, if you will, that way about, is this necessary? Like I say, if one thing I could stress to the board would be, you gotta think in terms of 10 acres, 2 megawatt, not 2,000 acres and 200 megawatt here. And the 10 and 2, that could certainly change, like Garth kind of alluded to. I mean, if you wanna increase it, you certainly can. This isn't something that's set in stone. That you can
Was
certainly
the-
increase it, but
Was the 10 and 2 guidance from the county commission? Where did those numbers come
No,
from?
they came from our meeting with our.
with Art Valley.
Okay, so that's the utilities kind of.
Yeah,
goal.
so
Okay.
we visited with them because we wanted to know what their roadmap was in essence, and that was key. I think a lot of the regulations based on, okay, well, how big do they need? How many megawatts are they allowed to develop? Like I said, we don't want to go through another 2-month process and all of a sudden we do something that's contrary to what they need. And so they gave us that information right there. And so that's why we said 10 and 2 versus 15 and 4, for example.
I don't believe they have a 2 megawatt one in this county, and they don't have 10 acres in this county.
Yeah.
I think they have 8, and it's like 1.6 or something.
6 or 7, you know. The 10, we thought, okay, you know, if something happens and they're allowed to do greater megawatt, then maybe they can do something like that with the 10, or it gives them a little more room for a storage facility where if they need it or whatever. So that's why we went with that. But yeah, the one in 2021, I think the survey shows like, if I recall, like 8.6 acres.
I'm thinking of some of these electrical substations or transfer station installs out in the rural areas, or some oil and gas equipment, the pipeline controls, all, you know, I don't know what the names of them are, but in any of those, do we require development agreements?
Nope. No. I mean, we,
I don't know that they're 10 acres, but
well, we just did, recall last year, the Evergy expansion out there off of South Halsted.
Their storage yard there.
Yeah,
Yeah.
next door to there, yeah, on Cargill's property, south of town. And that was a small, I think it was 4 acre electrical expansion, but, you know, we didn't do
I
anything
think
with
what he's
that.
talking about, like there's some kind of a, I don't know, gas line or something, substation there, like at Yoder and Arlington Road,
Yeah.
just north of that.
Yeah.
Little bunch of pipes sticking out of the ground, I have no idea what it is.
We haven't though, I mean,
Is that zone, I mean, is that something they
I don't
have
think
to
that's
come in and
zoned.
get
I think that's unzoned,
I don't
I
know.
believe. Well, like many years ago, under my watch, you know, we did the big Evergy electrical substation there, 43rd and
Oh,
up there. You know, it's 80 acres. We didn't do a developer's agreement with that.
Yeah.
Anything.
That was a huge project.
Yeah, that was huge, yeah. I don't think anybody was on the board at the time we did that, but yeah, I mean, that was 80 acres and that was a huge project and we didn't require anything like that, nor did the county commissioners any kind of additional agreement with that. I'm sure they just came in and, if required, got their oversized overweight permits and did everything, but having a separate agreement was not part of the discussion.
so like Jack's example of a decommissioning, if Evergy just wants to shut that thing down, that's just whatever they decide to do.
Could be, if you so choose to go that
Just take a
route.
Lock the door and walk
Hole in the
away.
ground.
Yeah, yeah.
They can take what's valuable and leave the rest.
But we do that with big buildings now. I mean, you know, we don't have anything that requires somebody to remove a structure from their property if it's, you know, dilapidated of any kind. So just, I'm not saying one way or the other, I'm just saying this is what we do now. You know, you develop a property and if you move on and the building starts deteriorating, we don't go after it and make them tear down, because we don't have building codes, so we don't make them tear it down or anything. So that's my little presentation, if you will, I guess, and
So,
I guess we all, probably think we ought to just go ahead and continue this meeting to another date.
oh yeah, that's definitely on
What's
the,
the other date we want to use?
well, that's a good question. That'd be the flavor of be the opinion of the board if we want to do a special meeting in between. Our next regular schedule is February 15th.
yes.
So just remember one thing, until these are created, nobody can do anything in this county, including ground-mounted residential or a co-op.
You getting any heat from any of that at this point?
Not yet, but I think there's concerns.
Yeah.
Yeah, not yet. Nope, I've had a few inquiries on projects, and I've let those companies know, but I haven't heard anything back. But I don't know at this time if it was a ground or a roof. I just told the company through email that it was, there's a current moratorium on until June 30th, I think it is, or is it June 30th?
It's 1st of July.
First of, yeah.
Or until
Yeah.
Moratorium on roof though, is there?
No moratorium on roof.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, it doesn't sound like this board's interested in, certainly the commissioners are not interested in roof, yeah, so. That's the only thing that'd be permitted right now.
What's everybody's thoughts of having a special meeting that week of the 5th of February? Somewhere within that week?
I can do the first part of the week, but I'm gonna be out of town probably starting Wednesday.
Okay. Yeah, you're pretty quiet down there. You have any?
Third is kind of taken up, but I don't
Okay.
want
Well-
to mess up anybody else.
Nope, the 3rd is a Saturday, right?
Is it?
Yeah.
Okay. 'Cause I was thinking it was during the week. I don't have my calendar.
First even, that's a Thursday,
I'm out of town that week.
I'm out of town the first.
the whole week out.
Yep.
Sure.
What day?
Well, look, if we're gonna go that first full week in February, it looks like either the 5th or the 6th, that Monday or Tuesday.
Yeah.
Either day.
Either day works for me.
Alan?
Either day works for me.
Yep,
Harley?
And we're looking at the 5th?
5th or 6th.
5th or the 6th?
Yeah.
I'd prefer Monday.
You prefer
I
Monday?
prefer Monday because I have something already Tuesday evening and we typically don't go at a rapid pace. So I would prefer a Monday
That's
on the
just-
5th.
5th.
Okay, everybody good with that?
Monday the 5th.
Monday,
Okay,
February
so-
5th.
So we'll recess. I'll entertain a motion to recess to
Time and place as
to
well.
Monday, right? Monday, February
So
5,
Monday, February 5th.
4:30 PM.
Okay, I would make a motion that.
Here at the Public Works Building.
Right, we recess this hearing until February 5th, Monday at 4:30 PM here at the Reno County Public Works Building.
Been so moved. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Been moved and seconded. Any discussion on those dates and times and place? Not staff, please call.
You want to call roll or voice
I
vote?
would like you to call roll, please. If you don't mind.
Sure. Shortfager,
Yes.
Strand,
Yes.
Schaefer,
Yeah.
Seltzer,
Yes.
Macklin,
Yes,
Martin,
Yes.
and Gertison.
Yes.
And what's our homework assignment for that meeting?
You're gonna review, everything in yellow is in question.
I mean, the whole document, really.
So
15 and 25 or just 25?
Both.
Both, yeah. On the 15,
Residential land.
we were talking about the size. One of the issues was how, not the height or the setback, but the size, based on the lot size or something. Is one concern.
Okay. Oops, let me get my- All right. Now, I think we'll move into our regular business.
So one other thing to think about, and this is in the zoned area now, but it could move on, is whether you're gonna allow this in the Cheney watershed or not too. Can you think about all that? Because that needs to be answered.
Yes, what?
And if you're gonna allow this within the light commercial within any part of the Cheney watershed in the zoned area of the county, because that's what we're talking about now. And
So only in the zone.
Right now,
But
only in
take
the
into
zone.
consideration the Genie watershed.
Watershed, because that's one of the big
Or
areas.
other areas for that matter.
yeah,
I mean, that could be part of that discussion.
so is a 10-acre deal, is that an issue in the Cheney watershed or not? You need to think about that. Yes or no?
All righty. Okay, so we'll move on to to the regularly scheduled January 18 Planning Commission meeting. Staff, you want to call the roll for that?
Yes. Shortfigure.
Here.
Strand. Here. Schaefer.
Here.
Seltzer. Here. Macklin.
Here,
Martin. Here. Goodson.
Here. Okay, thank you for the discussion already that we've had this evening. Appreciate all that. Just a few quick comments before we go into the minutes. Something that I've been participating in at AGCO is a culture training. And it's, the three levels are farmer first, speak up, team up. So I'll kind of give you a quick overview. The farmer first is focus on our customer. In our instance, the customer is the county, and it's also our neighbors. Yep, and it's our neighbors and our constituents. Speak up, it's what we've experienced here this evening. And I want to kind of pause right there, and they talk a lot about, and I'm going to have to get it up on my phone, or I'm going to misspeak. But it's called psychological safety, and what that means is we all feel safe to speak up. We all feel safe that we can disagree openly, and we can surface all of our concerns with no fear of our negative repercussions or pressure, or sugarcoat bad news. Don, you never sugarcoat bad news. You just gotta give it. Nonetheless, the speak up portion is probably, in my mind, probably applies to us the most. Listening to what everybody has to say, and we all in the team up piece of it comes together when we decide our vote. And I just wanted to kind of some thoughts. It was kind of at the top of my head as we were going through that culture training at work, and I thought maybe that'd be something to share here. So moving on, trust that you've had a chance to review the December 21 minutes. Chair will entertain a motion there.
So moved to approve.
Second.
Been moved and seconded. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor of approving December 2021 minutes, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Okay, minutes approved. New business, election of Planning Commission chairperson. Entertain nominations.
I would nominate Russ Gertson. He's doing a great job.
I second that.
Okay. it was
My second goes along with him.
Jeez.
Not only doing a good
There
job,
isn't
but he's,
third, fourth, and a fifth.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Harley, sorry.
but he's done an excellent job of interacting with the general public is here. And I take great note of that. He knows when to control and when to allow. And both of those are important to the general public. So my second is a big second.
Okay. I'll accept the nomination. Do you need to vote? We've moved, and it's been a motion, it's been a second. Any other nominations, I should say?
Everybody's looking around.
Count the dots in the ceiling.
Used to do that in the dentist's office.
Call roll,
Okay,
if you're ready.
we're ready.
Shortfigure.
Yes.
Strand.
Yes.
Schaefer.
Yes.
Seltzer.
Yes.
Macklin.
Yes?
Martin.
Yes.
Goodson.
Do I vote for myself? I can abstain. Okay. Election of the vice chair.
Mr. Chairman, I would nominate our present vice chairman to continue. I have knowledge of his past experience in this particular area, and he's done a good job when necessary. Thank you. And so I nominate our present vice chairman.
I would second that.
Are there any other nominations?
Sure. Please, anybody.
Okay, seeing none, you want to call the roll?
Shortfigure,
Yes.
Strand.
Yeah.
Schaefer,
Yes.
Seltzer.
Yes.
Macklin,
Yes,
Martin,
Abstain.
and then Gertson.
Yes. Is there any other business needs to be brought before the planning commission?
I have one thing, Mr. Chair, right quick. I don't necessarily need an answer tonight. I know this board's got a lot to think about here, but I'd just like to know if you have any topics that you would like to have for future training. Not saying we're gonna spend time on doing this now, but I need to do something with the board potentially to kind of keep you guys going and in the know and stuff. And so if you have topics, you can tell them to me now and I'll try and put together something. Or if you think of topics, then certainly just email me or tell me next month or whatever. Like I say, I know you guys have a lot to think about right now with these regs and probably not, but it's time of the year that, you know, we need to be thinking about doing something, because last year we were all about regulations. We did a little bit of training, I think, early in the year and stuff, but.
Some subdivision training?
Yeah, but before we started the solar regs, but something just to keep in the back of your mind a little bit if things come up, or whatever that you'd like to have some more formal discussion on, just let me know. I'd be happy to try and put together something. We can have another discussion, and that's all I have.
Is there any other business that needs to be brought before the board?
One other thing I'd be amiss if I didn't mention is that, for the rest of you, if you didn't know, the Board of County Commissioners at the end of December voted to have Jack and Russ continue to sit on the Planning Commission. And so congratulations to you both and appreciate your
Well, they
service.
would reelected him, I'm glad to hear that.
That should have came before that.
It's gonna be real awkward if they don't show up.
That was our out, Jack.
Yeah, I
We
know.
didn't get it.
Yeah.
That's on.
Just want to let everybody know they were formally appointed, yes.
I heard Don's comments on the radio. He was actually pretty nice to us.
Yeah, it was. Very, very. Okay.
I like the part about it, where it said, it takes at least 3 years before you have any idea what's going on. And you're right. It does, it takes a while.
Sure. All right, is there any other business for the planning commission? Seeing none, chair will entertain a motion to adjourn the planning commission portion of it.
and so moved.
Second.
Been moved and seconded to adjourn. Any discussion? All in favor of adjournment of the planning commission meeting, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Planning commission is adjourned. All right, now we'll move on to the zoning, Board of Zoning Appeals meeting for January 18. Staff, you want to make this official and call a roll?
Shortfigure,
Here?
Strand. Schaefer. Seltzer. Macklin.
Yes.
Martin. Gertson.
Here. Okay, in your packet, you would have had minutes from the August 17 Board of Zoning Appeals meeting. Trust if you had a chance to review those, the chair will entertain a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I move for approval of those, but I'd like a clarification, probably something I was not aware of, on the second page, where it's down there at the bottom of the page, if the special exception is approved, a double fee is charged for the zoning permit. I wasn't aware of that, so is it?
Page 3. Oh, okay.
It's on bottom of page 2. Is that,
Oh, down there, okay.
is the fee doubled if you have to go through a special exception?
No, it's because he's already started.
If the special exception is approved, a double fee is for the zoning permit for the building.
Okay,
not the special exception fee is not
Okay,
double.
well, I understood that.
Okay, yeah.
But I guess that shows I do read these things.
You do.
So when I say I move for approval of that, because I really did read it.
So, yeah, anytime you build without a zoning permit, then the fee
doubles.
the fee doubles, yes.
I probably should have known that, but I did not.
Yep.
Okay, been moved and seconded, is there any discussion, other discussion on those minutes?
Who seconded? I didn't.
Harley seconded, but he wanted us some discussion.
Harley made the motion, I had.
Okay.
I'll second it.
Jack second. Any discussion? Cheryl Leonard, no, all in favor of approving August 17 minutes for the Board of Zoning Appeals, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Minutes approved. Okay. The next item of business is discussion possible action on revision of the Board of Zoning Appeals bylaws. Staff, do you want to kind of give us a rundown of what you got there?
Sure, I'd be happy to. So this is the real reason why we amended the planning commission bylaws, is because we actually have some changes to the Board of Zoning Appeals, so I took the opportunity to do both. So that's the reason why we had the planning commission ones last month here. A lot of the changes are the same as what we did with the planning commission, bylaw, just taking out extra words and trying to make sure everything says the same thing here. But there are some additional duties that you've acquired, so I'm going to kind of go over those, and those extra duties really start on I guess it'd be the second page 3. It talks about floodplain variances. You've always had the responsibility of hearing and reviewing floodplain variances. Thankfully, we really haven't had anybody request a variance, mainly because I don't encourage variances to our floodplain regulations. However, there could be instances where maybe a variance is needed, and it makes maybe sense to do something like that. I'm in the midst of trying to think of one, right now, but the only one I can really think of, I guess, it doesn't really apply to this county, is like if you wanted to put a boathouse out at the lake, and the lake is in the floodplain, well, you don't want to elevate your boathouse, obviously, to meet floodplain regulations, you want the boathouse to be in the lake, and so that'd be one kind of example that doesn't really apply here, but bottom line is there are times when, a variance could be requested by somebody, and so this board needs to be prepared for potentially doing something like that. The criteria to approve a variance is a lot different than the criteria that you use to approve a zoning variance. That criteria is listed there verbatim, and so that would be the criteria that you would use to review and possibly approve or deny a floodplain variance to that. Typically, it's going to be somebody that's not going to want to elevate a structure to the proper height or do what we call flood proofing of a structure to comply with the FEMA regulations. This is taken strictly out of the floodplain resolution that has been approved by the state and FEMA, and so the criteria here isn't something that's subject to your review and modification. This is right out of the floodplain requirements for the state and FEMA, and so it's not something that you can actually just go in and review and change because you don't like that. Under number 2, something that is a little bit different that FEMA changed probably year and a half to 2 years ago, has to do with agricultural structures. It could be a potential training topic in the future. I don't want to bore the board too much here, but agricultural structures had to comply with the same type of floodproofing regulations that a normal residential structure had, and not necessarily in this county, or maybe even in this state too much. It was a huge concern, but you gotta remember, regulations are nationwide here. It was posing some big concerns, I guess, in other parts of the country where a farmer would have to flood-proof a large agricultural building. Agricultural buildings, as you know, are exempt from zoning regulations, but they're not exempt from floodplain regulations. And so if a farmer wants to build a 100 by 200 foot building, it has to be elevated a foot above base flood, or it has to be what we call dry flood proof. Now, short-term dry flood proofing is you're preventing water from entering the building. And so you can imagine, you know, a farmer's issues, if you will, 100 by 200 foot building. He's gonna have a dirt floor, he's just gonna park his couple of combines in there, and now he's got to spend all this extra money on dry floodproofing a building when he could probably really care less if water gets inside that building or not, because of the fact that all it does is have his machinery, in there, and nothing of I don't want to say of value, but it's like it's not like you've got carpet in there and furnishings and all that. He's got his agricultural equipment in there. So it posed a big issue. Bottom line is FEMA finally changed their regulations to allow a person that's building an agricultural structure to do what they call wet flood proofing. But in order to do that, it actually has to take a review by this board for me to issue a floodplain development permit. So that is one of the big changes in
Wet floodproofing.
wet floodproofing is a process where you would install flood vents into a building, and wet floodproofing essentially allows flood waters to enter a building. And then when the flood waters recede, those flood waters will recede out of the building through proper flood vents. But, a lot of times, like people are building lean-tos. Well, those lean-tos had to be elevated or dry flood-proof. So like I say, it was a big issue with a lot of farmers, especially I think out in the western part of the country, where it's like, I don't care if the inside of my lean-to gets wet and stuff. And so I said, I don't have that issue really in this county too much, but it's an option that is available if for some reason, it has to happen here. And floodplain regulations are countywide, so those of you that live out in the unzoned area, you have to abide by those regulations as well for floodplain. And so it's something that's, now available to farmers to be able to get a floodplain variance and be able to just wet flood proof a large agricultural structure. The cutoff is 400 square feet, so 20 by 20. Anything that's over 20 by 20 has to be dry flood proofed regardless. Well, this provision right here says now my 100 by 200 foot ag building can now be wet flood proofed and not have to be dry flood proofed. Unfortunately, they didn't just say, yeah, go ahead and do it with just a permit through the administrator. It takes, a floodplain variance to do something like that. So that is your first added duty, if you will. Don't anticipate a lot, and like I say, so far in this county, I really haven't run across that issue. But it is available to people should a situation occur where, the floor is going to be dirt. That's usually where you have it is, it's going to be a dirt floor. Well, why do I have to, elevate it and or flood proof it, to prevent water from going in? Because I don't care, because it's a dirt floor.
I have a kind of a wordsmith question on number one, that top line over to the right. It says, in passing upon such application for variances. I'm having a hard time processing what that means.
Again, taken straight out of FEMA regulations, that was not my writing. I think that what that means is in reviewing such applications for variances, you shall. So what that's saying is that once you receive an application, then the board shall consider all the technical data and evaluation and all of these relevant factors. And so once an application is made, passing upon such application for the variances mean upon receiving an application for a variance, this is the criteria that you must use to review that case. Again, not my writing, and so I can't take the blame for that one.
I didn't want to blame you, I'm just trying to understand it.
Yeah, that's okay. The second major change on the back side of that page deals with sanitation code appeals. If you aren't aware, recently in the last 3 or 4 months, the environmental division has been moved under Public Works for last year or so, I guess, too. They've been doing some sanitation code revisions. Part of those revisions needs to include an appeal. And so this doesn't involve me in a sense, but since it is under the environmental division, what happens here is, just like with the zoning regulations, if you're in the process of installing a wastewater system or a well, and there's a regulation that is in there that you don't like, or you don't like the decision of the administrator, you can make an appeal to this Board of Zoning Appeals. And so what will happen there is it's a public meeting. There's not a notification requirement like what we have for variances. And so what will happen is the meeting, that won't be run by me. You'll probably hear from Darcy Basie regarding that. She'll have a report to present to the board, and you'll have a copy of that report. The applicant will be here, and then they'll be able to have a meeting, if you will, and you'll be able to take comments from the public if there is such a situation where somebody wants to take comment and hear and provide testimony to this board. And then it's going to work just like a variance. At the end of that discussion, the board will render a recommendation. A little bit different than, a variance. That recommendation then from this board goes to the Director of Public Works, where he'll review that, and then he'll make the decision on whether to grant that sanitation code appeal or not. Later on in this document, you'll see here, if that person then does not like his recommendation, then that person will have the right to take an appeal to the Board of County Commissioners.
And they will choose to listen to it or not.
So,
One question, Mark, in your verbiage in here, you have more than one reference to the administrator.
yes,
Who is that? What is that?
the administrator
There's
would
no
be
definition
me.
of who.
Yeah, the administrator is me, like, it'd be like the zoning administrator, it'd be me. So I'd be the one responsible for probably taking it, giving it to Darcy for her review, and then I would be the one setting it on the agenda.
Yeah, just there wasn't anything spelled out as to who that person
Yeah.
may be, that's why I was curious.
The administrator would be staff. It'd be either through me or through her. More than likely, probably me. I'll take that information, obviously pass it to her, because she's gonna be the one that's gonna be processing that case. And then, unlike, like I say, when you're acting as a Board of Zoning Appeal member, your decision is not final. That'd be the other thing that I would want to clarify. You're actually making a recommendation to the director, and then from that, the director will review that case and your decision, and then make his own decision. And then, like Don said, if they don't like that, they can then appeal that again to the Board of County Commissioners. And so, added duty to your list as a BZA member. Correct me if I'm wrong, I've been told that probably should not have any, or one, once in a great while, potentially, from what the revisions were to the sanitation code, but it's something that needs to be in there, because it is something that an applicant has a right to appeal. And so I wouldn't get maybe too worried about that. I guess we'll find out once the code is actually being implemented at that point, if we have those. But I've been told that, you probably, the way it's written now, probably should not have any, hardly at all, appeals. But
What's the current process been? Darcy says no,
No.
it's no, or
Yeah, I don't know that.
No, they had created a group to appeal to, they just created it. And then instead of coming here, but since now it's under me and it's out here, so now that group is not gonna hear their appeals, it needs to come from here, so it's just, so,
Yeah.
and I doubt if there's ever an appeal, but who knows?
Yeah. I explain
We got a
that?
bump in our compensation for.
Yes, you do.
Responsibility, right?
Yep. We're gonna double it, so.
Negotiate the multiplier, right?
You make zero right now, so we're doubling
You get
that.
the same gas money and the same wage. We'll double your wage. Yeah, there you go.
Double my
Which
wage.
is the same, nothing.
Good thing we have zero hourly rates.
Don't spend it all in one place.
On the bottom of that page, under variances, I'm gonna strike the word morals. We're not the moral police. That was kind of a leftover from a lot of regulations back in probably the 80s and 90s, where part of protecting the health, safety, morals, order, convenience, that was always included in zoning regulations, and that just never got changed, and so we're not into doing that, so we need to probably strike that, as well. Let's see, zoning appeals, something that we do right now, if you weren't aware of that, if me in interpreting the regulations one way, if a citizen doesn't agree with the way I interpret that, they would actually be able to file an appeal of that interpretation to this board, and then this board would actually make a determination as to what is the regulation saying. So whatever the regulation, maybe take solar collectors or whatever, for example, we've talked about that, very relevant topic. If I said a solar collector is X and the gentleman says solar collector is Y, if we can't come to an agreement to where I can issue a permit, then he could actually make an appeal to this board, and then you, as a board, would have to decide what that means and who is right, essentially. So that's what a zoning appeal
Got
would be.
the further appeal beyond us or not?
I don't know.
I think it would stop here.
I think it would probably stop. I don't know if a district court would be hearing something
We
like
have
that
to go
or
into the
not.
court system, though.
It wouldn't go on to the county commissioner, if that's what you're, what you're asking. No, it wouldn't do that. Under meetings, it's the same thing that I did under planning commission, just added welcome by the chairperson, and then the explanation, talking about adjourning into executive session. On the next page on the back, under number 7, all decisions of the BZA, except for the sanitation code appeals, are final. So here's where we were talking about, your appeal of the sanitation code is actually just a recommendation, but it needs to be heard by the Board of Zoning Appeals instead of the Planning Commission, so that's where you find that. And then that person has 30 days to appeal a decision, from the BZA to the district court, but not the sanitation code. Lastly, on the last page, under the signature lines at the top, under publicity, I was a little bit too quick in printing this off, and last month, Mr. Strand had talked about placing information on the website. The document that you have here does not mention about me placing that information on the website. I did make that change, and I believe our chairman can verify that that language is now in the BZA, that, we're going to make information available to the public by newspaper, radio, TV, but also the website. So I did make that change. It was just too late after I printed everything and I caught that. So that's the changes. BZA does not go to the Board of County Commissioners, and so to Mr. Macklin's comment last month regarding chairman being able to appear before the county commissioners, well, the chairman doesn't appear as a BZA member in front of the county commissioners because all decisions are final, so that's why that language isn't in the BZA, if you're curious about that.
Mr.
So
Chairman.
even in issues on the sanitation code, where those can be appealed to the county commission, then Don's the one that has to go and defend that at this point.
Yeah, it would
Come
be.
from his recommendation.
Yeah, it wouldn't be this board or anything like that. That's all I have unless there's further questions on that.
It appears to me that the administrator has done an excellent job of updating and bringing it up to getting it up to date, and I would recommend approval of these bylaws as submitted before this council.
Second.
Been moved and seconded. Any discussion?
Yeah, I have a late breaking question. I'm trying to, yeah, it's in here, never mind.
You're good?
Yeah.
Okay. Staff, you want to call the roll?
Schwarzenegger,
Yes.
Strand,
Yes?
Schaefer,
Yes.
Seltzer. Yes. Macklin.
Yes.
Yeah.
And Gertson.
Yes. Okay. Is there any other business to be brought before the Board of Zoning Appeals? Don?
We don't have anything for the BZA.
Board? Seeing none, Chair will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Been moved and seconded. Any discussion? All in favor of adjournment of the Board of Zoning Appeals meeting, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign.